I've often complained that my rapid schedule doesn't let me give RPGs their proper due. The games often don't get going until you're 5 or 6 hours in, and RPGs of this era rarely start with a bang, more of a very slow crawl. In the case of Valeur, it becomes more of a problem because this is the single worst start to an RPG that I think I've encountered. It is laughably, disastrously bad. I wound up playing for over 2 hours, much longer than I usually am able to give a game, and I barely managed to reach the first dungeon and strengthen my character to level 3. La Valeur was originally a computer game by Kogado Software Products, and they handled the porting to the PC Engine themselves. It also was their first console game. Kogado is still around making visual novels for the Switch and PS5, so hanging in there, but just barely. Outside of Japan, they're best known for, well, this is a bit of a challenge. Only 3 of their games have ever been released outside of Japan, and they're Power Dolls, Nurse Love Addiction, and Cosmic Wars. I've at least heard of 2 of them, but I honestly wouldn't expect anyone else to have. Before I move on from the computer game, you might be asking yourself, is the PC Engine version different from the computer game? And the answer is yes, extremely different. The problems that I have all seem to be confined to the PC Engine version. The plot of the game is that an evil wizard has some magic crystals that grant him anything he desires, and what he desires is to rule the world. As a hero, your job is to go to various cities, solve the one problem that they have there, and eventually make your way to the wizard and get those crystals. Okay, let's get into this nightmare. You start out in Hobbiton. No, I'm not joking about that. Their problem is that a girl has been kidnapped by monsters and is being kept in a nearby cave. When you agree to help, you're given a sword and 10 healing fruit, and then told to get to it. Pressing button 2 will bring up a menu, and anytime you interact with the menu in this game, there's this buzzing sound when you select things that makes it sound like you've done something incorrect. It's a minor bit of poor sound design that I'd usually let pass, but I am not feeling generous to La Valeur. If you want to talk to someone, you'll need to interrupt their path and then bring up the menu to choose to talk. And you have to interrupt their path because otherwise they will walk away in the time that you're bringing up the menu. All friendly NPCs are on an actual path, not random walks. So that's at least something. Hobbiton has an item shop, a tavern where you can spend 10 gold to recover all of your health, and also gives you the choice to save the game. And finally, there's a weapon shop that sells the same sword that you're using, a spear, a club, a shield, and armor. You don't start with any defensive equipment, so I think it'd be pretty reasonable to make getting those a priority. We'll come back to the weapon shop because that is a whole thing. At the far end of town, you'll find a wizard who will introduce you to the magic system in this game. This is one of the very few positive things I have to say about La Valeur, and maybe that's because I wasn't able to engage with it properly. Every town has a wizard, and all of the wizards give you a trial. In this case, there's a bunch of chests in the old forest that sits between Hobbiton and the cave, and in these chests there are 6 different rings. If you bring back at least 3 rings, the wizard will give you a spell. If you bring back all 6, then you get your choice of 4 spells. The catch here is that you can only know a single spell from each wizard at a time. So if you go out and bring back 3 rings and get a freeze spell, and then go out and bring back 3 rings again, then the wizard might change your spell to healing. While every wizard offers a different set of spells, you can only have 1 spell from each wizard. So there's actually a bit of choice and decision making there. Now, 2 catches to this particular wizard's quest. First, there's a dozen chests in the old forest, and while one of the chests, the most difficult one to reach, doesn't have a ring, the rest of them do. So there's a bunch of redundant chests in the maze. Second, you have to have magic points to cast spells. You start with 0 magic, and you get magic at level... I'm not really sure, but it's definitely after level 3. I wound up spending almost a full hour just trying to acquire magic, and when I finally succeeded, it turned out I couldn't use it. The reason it took me so long to do that simple task is, well, now we have to get into the leveling and combat system, because this is where La Valeur goes from kinda bad to complete train wreck. Let's start with leveling. To go from level 1 to level 2 requires 10 experience points. Combat that you encounter at level 1 will give you between 1 and 2 experience points. Okay, that doesn't sound too bad. You start out with 200 hit points, and enemies that you fight at level 1 typically do between 30 and 50 points of damage. That's assuming they don't get a critical hit on you. It takes about 3 to 4 rounds of combat for you to defeat one, and alongside of your 1 or 2 experience points, you also get 1 or 2 gold pieces. So if things go well for you, at level 1, you can usually complete 2 combats before you have to withdraw. You got 10 healing fruits at the start, and those restore 100 health. If you're defeated, then you go back to the start of the area that you're in and lose half your gold. But you retain your experience points. So being the mathematically inclined player that I was, I recognized that the financial gains at level 1 were significantly less than the cost to heal. That made the obvious strategy fight until you're defeated, and then repeat until you reach level 2, and become strong enough to actually survive a couple more combats. In La Valeur, it turns out that enemy combats scale with your level. Yes, even level 2. So the moment I hit level 2, I started encountering groups of 2 enemies. The way La Valeur handles combat with multiple enemies is weird. Basically, groups of enemies are treated as one single enemy, but when you do enough damage to them, then their numbers decrease. So groups attack as one and do extra damage as a result. So now enemies are doing 40 to 60 damage, and your maximum HP has increased by 30. You're not even keeping pace with the damage. But at least the rewards are improving, right? Well, like I said, La Valeur treats enemy groups as one enemy, so even though you're fighting 2 at a time, they're still only giving you 1 experience point. And you have to get 80 more experience to reach level 3. Well, there is one piece of good news. The financial rewards have increased. So now it is technically possible to save up some money and start buying equipment. The first thing I purchased was a shield. I was thinking a bit more survivability would help. Turns out that was a bad idea for 2 reasons. First, the chest most distant from the forest entrance has a shield in it. And second, and slightly more significantly, the shield does nothing. No damage reduction, enemies don't miss you more often. The shield does nothing. Okay, so we'll save up again and buy armor. Of course, at this point I've noticed a pattern, but I still have to try. And as it turns out, the armor does nothing. Maybe the difference between your base level stats and that first shield and armor is so negligible that it's invisible, but it doesn't do much for first impressions. So now let's save up and get other weapons. And this is the point where we learn the major problems with La Valeur's combat system. You see, the combat menu is not simply fight, magic, use item, and run away. Instead, you have swing, stab, strike, magic, run away, and item. As a quick aside, running away also doesn't work especially well. I was only successful about 1 in 4 times, and that really helped slow down that quest for the rings. Every enemy is vulnerable to a different kind of attack, and similarly, each weapon is effective at a different kind of attack. So you don't just carry around a weapon in La Valeur, you carry around a whole arsenal, and then in combat, you select use and change to the appropriate weapon for that situation. Did you think the use option would be used for recovery items? Nope, it is solely switching weapons and quest items. The only way to recover health in combat is magic. The one small kindness to this unnecessarily complicated system is that switching weapons switches which attack you default to. So when you have a sword equipped, you would default to swing, a spear defaults to stab, and a club defaults to strike. Even in the old forest, a lot of the enemies take less damage to the sword, which is your only weapon when you start. So that's just one more way that Valeur screws you up. The way that the game intends that you progress is chowing down on healing items constantly. This would be the healing items that restore 100 health. So get into a combat, finish, eat a healing item, get into the next combat, win that fight, eat another fruit, and so on. Those items don't work like they do in other games. I've already noted how you can't use them in combat. The thing is, when you go into the item shop and purchase them, you don't buy a healing fruit. You buy a bundle of 10 healing fruits for 20 gold. So it turned out that healing items aren't that expensive, it was just completely counterintuitive. Okay, so while dealing with the ring quest, grinding up all the cash for all the useless items, and trying to figure out what to do, I managed to get my 80 experience to reach level 3, and then I start getting attacked by larger groups. And then these groups give you no experience points at all. Even though you're still fighting things that can take you out quickly, they just stop giving you experience points in the old forest at level 3. To reach level 4 takes 150 experience points, and you'll have to get access to the cave before you can start leveling up again. Don't worry though, the enemies in the cave still only give 1 or 2 experience points each. The cave is complicated because when you go in, you're told it's dark, and then you leave immediately. As you're walking around the old forest, you'll meet the Ents, and this one says he'll give you something that doesn't need oil if you give him a truffle. So that's a pretty good hint that that's where the lantern is. And then this one mentions that he lost his pet in the cave, which we'll see in a moment. So there's your first proper goal. To enter the first real dungeon, you have to save up enough money and level up enough that you can defeat the boss that's tucked near the mushroom in the old forest. This boss is only vulnerable to stabbing, so you have to get the spear. And you have to increase your stats enough to have a chance, so you'll need to be level 3. And even once you've done all of that, you will need a critical in order to defeat it, and it can never crit you while you're fighting. Also, someone could miss to swing the outcome, but in a straight-up fight where both you and the monster land blows, and you each do the default damage, you will not win. There's no way to improve your chances by getting consumables. You can't level up past level 3, and you can't use magic at that point, so you can't pick out a spell that'll be effective. You just have to keep trying until you get lucky. So after 4 attempts, I got lucky. Then I could finally take the mushroom to the end, get the lantern, and enter the cave. Like all quest items, you have to go into the menu and actively use it. And then I could start exploring. And look, there's a treasure chest right there. Maybe I'll finally get something that will give me an advantage since the monsters in the cave are even more nasty? Of course not. The only treasure chest in the cave is trapped and reduces you to 1 hit point. A bit of exploring turns up the other Ent's pet, who is trapped in this box, and you can't get in there, so you have to wait until they approach the crack and bring up the menu at just the right moment to talk to them. The pet wants you to go and find a glowstone and bring it back. This is only visible when the lantern is turned off, and so you start backtracking through the cave, turning off the lamp on every screen, until you find the spot that glows. Pick up that stone, take it back to the pet, where you have to use the glowstone, because talking is insufficient, and then rather than taking it or running off, it just wanted to see it. You keep the glowstone with your quest items. The pet tells you about its invisible canoe that's only usable in the dark. And that's the point where I said, I can't take this anymore, and stopped. Also, I needed to go back and buy another 50 healing fruits. So does a game with an opening this dire have any defenders in Japan? And as far as I can tell, the answer is no. Everyone with something positive to say was talking about the computer version. All the talk on the PC Engine version was about the poor game design. Especially how poorly everything was scaled. One of the few video walkthroughs I could find wound up having to cheat and give themselves 999 health and magic. They weren't going to sit around grinding forever. And I think at this point in the video it's pretty clear that I found Valeur to be utterly dire. I didn't even talk about the multimedia features because there's just so much wrong with the gameplay. Though the nicest thing I can say is that the soundtrack isn't bad. This is a good contender for the worst Dragon Quest style RPG that I've played. It's a game that actively punishes you for playing it, and unless you're a glutton for punishment, it's better to just walk away.